Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of EYEONICON, the episode where we go around the ecosystem interviewing our builders, foundation members, and just so happens I have one with me today. TJ, welcome to the show, man.
Hello, Fez. Thanks for having me on.
No worries. I'm glad you came on. Like I'm still feeling guilty from having you on, recording it, and then never airing the episode. Sorry, man. Sorry.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I think it's about time for me to forgive you, and we can continue this.
Thank you. So I'm glad. I'm glad you've come on the show, man. Look, let's kick things off. What's been happening in your world, in the foundation world, from your side of things?
Yeah, I mean, with a company like Icon and just I think the industry in general, I think a lot of people wear a lot of hats in terms of, specifically for me, I started off working with the CPS as a project manager. So I work with Iconosphere team who is developing the CPS, and we're basically kind of focused on improving the protocol and making bug fixes when needed and responding to feedback and that type of thing. And then that kind of evolves into more of like a BTP role, and from like a business development side, where it used to be trying to, get these blockchains to hard fork to implement our stuff. And now we're to a point where a lot of these business development conversations are more of with protocols itself, like implementing our technology and building on top of, our existing messaging layer, which will be super interesting, I think, to go along with the incentive program. And just with all that, it's just a bunch of random things with grants and the Discord, and a lot of recent conversations have been around like core economics. So we've been talking a lot about like the change monetary policy and how to ensure that validators are really able to sustain their nodes and getting paid for doing what they're supposed to do, which is producing blocks, all the way up to relay incentives for BTP and the auction system. There's always a lot of different conversations happening, and the industry moves so fast that today we could be talking about the CPS, and tomorrow we could be talking about some major change with BTP. So in general, I think that there's just like a lot of roles that not just me as well, like most of the foundation members and community members like yourself even wear like a lot of different hats to make this this machine run.
Yeah. So at the start we were chatting and I came on this interview to pick your brain about CPS, but you've given me a whole world to explore.
Yeah.
So
Pandora's box has been opened.
Exactly. Well, I have so many questions, but I think to your point, what I'm really getting, I notice you very much are now involved in that, what the tokenomics, the kind of way to make money work for you that works best for protocol. When you're talking CPS, when you're talking validators, you're talking tokenomics in general. I've noticed that's where your strength is personally, and it seems like you tend to gravitate to that side of things naturally. Fair?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I would say that in general, that's probably just something I'm more interested in general.
Yeah.
Whether or not I wasn't, hired to do that type of thing. I'm not a developer at heart. I'm more of interested in the economic side of things, and specifically like incentives and game theory, and try to make sure that people are making the best decisions or the most optimal decisions is something that's pretty interesting to me.
Yeah. And definitely in our personal conversations, I know we've juked it out, and now I've started to realize why you feel so strongly when you start talking about that. It's just how your brain works. It's passion.
It's not there's no ill intent if I get a little strong worded. It's all passion.
It's okay. Just strike three is almost on the cards, but no.
I know.
Cool. Okay. So let's kick things off initially. I still want to zone in on CPS, and then we'll zone out, and I'm keen to tackle the BTP, have a bit of a BTP conversation with you. So CPS, let's do a quick where it's at the moment. So if I were to ask you, the first question is, let's do a summary. So we know 10% off the 4% inflation gets routed to CPS. Is that automatically happening now? Because I know there was a bit of work happening in the background to automate that process rather than it being manual.
Yeah, so from like a very higher level, the CPS was originally funded from the ICON Foundation, and that was a manual process where someone had to claim ICON Foundation node rewards and manually send those funds to the CPS Treasury. And with it being like a decentralized grant system, that was a very centralized process to kind of initiate the funding for a lot of these projects. And what is kind of involved too, was kind of always the plan in general, was using ICON inflation to directly be distributed to the CPS Treasury, which is how it currently works. I think that change was made around like April or the spring of this year. Yeah. And a major component of that was having Java smart contracts. So we had to make the migration from the Python contract to the Java smart contract for the CPS Treasury. And what that allowed us to do is actually give ownership of the contract to the network itself. Yeah. So that was just more of like a security measure of now I can't go in, or anyone can't go in and just take the funding from inflation or be able to distribute those funds however they meet or deem necessary. So yep. But yeah, in general, that's how it currently works now, is the inflation is deposited directly into the CPS Treasury.
Cool. And is that a daily? It's a daily or weekly or?
Yeah, it's similar to, I think, how iScore works, okay. Where, it's after the whatever 42,800 blocks are done, those rewards get distributed. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it turns out to be about 10,000 ICX per day that is deposited in the CPS Treasury.
Okay, cool. So that's good. That's good to know. And now what happens next? So in terms of, originally it was ICX, but obviously now we have bnUSD. So what are those limits? So how much does the CPS Treasury fill up in bnUSD before it stops converting ICX to bnUSD and starts stacking ICX?
Yeah, right now the amounts are pretty arbitrary. So anyone can bring up a discussion to get these changed. But yeah. Right now, I think it's set at 300,000 bnUSD. And once that threshold is reached, then ICX starts to, accumulate in the Treasury. And I actually don't think that we have a cap for ICX anymore, or it's so high that it's likely not to be reached. And, that's a whole conversation in itself that we've talked about before. I think the community has given input on that. But for now, what happens is when the ICX is in the Treasury, it is swapped to bnUSD or I think is routed through Balanced and, fills up in the Treasury. But we've had so much projects being funded that we haven't even reached that 300K bnUSD cap yet. So, yeah. Like I said, that amount's pretty arbitrary right now. And I definitely think that for the longer term sustainability of the protocol, these things can be changed and explored in the future. But yeah, that's the current parameters.
Cool. I think let's put a full disclosure on this conversation. Everything that TJ says, it's not TJ's will, and it's not him making the final say. These are things that that's where they're at, and network proposals, things like that can be put up and changed. So I'm just trying to get current state. I almost feel, TJ, you're defending. It's not me, guys.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That'll save me in the Twitter DMs later.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. So that's good to know. Now, one other little thing, like I'm just as well gonna air some stuff, and I think you can input as well. Like I remember the whole bnUSD conversation. People, but ICX is being sold as inflation. Guys, just remember, ultimately, if something ICX is being sold into bnUSD, there's more demand for bnUSD, it reflects more demand for ICX because a lot more ICX is used to mint bnUSD. Fair to say?
I think that's a very accurate representation of what is currently going on. And like even before, if you think about it, when projects are receiving funding in ICX, like if you're a developer and you're using those funds to pay whatever bills for your house or any like real world or expenses, you kind of have to sell that ICX anyways to get into your native currency. So just in general, like if you're going to fund something, there's going to be some type of sell pressure going on. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can explore to mitigate that. We can explore different like treasury diversification. We could also use something like karma bonds where rather than immediate sell pressure, this ICX is kind of vested, and the selling pressure is a bit more distributed over the long run. So there's a lot of different things that we could do that would, I guess, help. But if you look at like how much ICX and like bnUSD is being swapped on Balanced itself, like a lot of this volume isn't significant enough to make a big difference anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's my ultimate point, even in current state. I mean, initially, this is where my mind went, but after calming down and reflecting, this is always what comes back to me. Regardless, so you're saying 10,000, it's getting swapped. Ultimately, if it's being swapped into, and this is why I'm always very big on bnUSD, because that in indirect, even in the moment, it may not feel like it, but as I said, more demand for bnUSD is actually better. That, what is it? If you say it's at $1, so you're swapping literally sucking up 40,000 ICX to buy that $10,000 worth of bnUSD if you do the ratio at 4 times the amount. But that's all this comes to. Yeah, sorry.
I think something like pretty important to like take into account as well is that these funds are hopefully being used to actually bring value to the network. So we're essentially just using this inflation to hopefully improve the network's value. And so it's not like this is just sunk cost, hopefully. It's actually going towards a good use voted on by like network validators. So I think it's a pretty interesting funding mechanism for sure.
It's definitely, because I recall now that tweet where you did the math on if we keep funding at this rate and each protocol brings on this much kind of network utility, transactions, etc., just people, users using it, this is how it will offset the overall inflation spend. Which that's when I had my aha moment. Like when I saw that, I was like, okay, now I understand why you've been a big advocate of not burning, but trying to, spend the money wisely. But yeah. So it's good to hear. Now, as I would keep moving through with CPS priority system, talk to me about that. Just a quick overview of how it works.
Yeah. So I'll give a bit of context on this as well, because originally once the bnUSD treasury was implemented, we had these caps that I had previously talked about, and those caps are kind of like the maximum that could be proposed for that period from prospective projects. And kind of what a situation we ran into, I think it was around like January, February, was there was so much demand for CPS funding that people were actually like racing to be the first ones to actually be the proposers, because it was like a first come first served basis, where once that bnUSD cap was reached in potential funding, then essentially no one else could apply for funding. And I would say that was a design mistake on my part that couldn't have really been, or I think is improved upon by the priority system. And basically what happens with the priority system now is, from a very high level, is it allows anyone for any amount of ICX to create a proposal and request funding from the CPS. And it's up to the validators that are governing the CPS to determine which of those projects are in the highest priority, which will bring the most value to the network. And all that occurs is to go along with approving or denying a project at the end of the voting period. Validators just rank from, like, if there's 5 projects, they rank them 1 to 5. This is what I think is the highest priority that should receive funding first, and it goes down the line. And how it works in the back end now is that whatever bnUSD amount is in the CPS treasury at the end of the voting period is the amount that's eligible for funding. So we can't run into a situation before where there was 200K requested, but there was only 100K in the treasury. And now we have to figure out if both of these projects are accepted, does the CPS break, or do we have to find a way to fill it with 100K? And that's a pretty centralized process and decision-making that was occurring, where now basically the only thing that can be distributed is what's actually in the treasury. And so to kind of end this, the priority system works now that after the voting occurs, the highest priority gets the first stab at the vote at the treasury funds.
Yeah.
And if there's 100K in the treasury and they request 50K, they'll receive their 50K, and it goes on to the next project. And since there's 50K left in the treasury and they request 40K, there's enough for them to get their funding as well. And what will end up happening is, as we go down the line, we get to number 3, where they request 20,000 bnUSD, but there's only 10K left. So while they were accepted, they weren't deemed a high enough priority compared to those first 2 projects.
Yeah.
And in a way, it actually introduces a bit of competition and trying to ensure that the projects that are actually competing for these grants are providing as much value as possible for these, or they might not, or they'll be out prioritized for voting or for funding.
So in that scenario, like option 3, yep, they want 20, there's only 10. What if option 4 wants 5,000? In that round, will CPS then fund option 4 because there's still something left, or does it just stop there and wait for the next round?
Correct. They would receive the funding. So It just continues to trickle down the priority ladder until either there's no projects left or there is no money left. And I think we've actually run into a couple of scenarios recently where we were actually left with like 60 or 70,000 bnUSD in the treasury after the period because projects were either denied or they just weren't, or there wasn't enough left for them. So, which is, in my opinion, a better system than we had before, and is a bit more of a permissionless system for people trying to get in to propose a grant proposal. They're not racing in on the second that the application period opens.
So. And in that scenario, so if 3 then gets overlooked because of wanting 20,000, then do the PREPs validators do they vote in the next round? Does a reprioritization happen with all the new projects again? So they could move from, in the next round, if they were number 3 again in the next round, become number 1 just based on, or it just restarts again. Is that what?
Yeah. So it just restarts again. And right now, how we initially designed it was that project that was accepted but didn't receive funding is just automatically submitted to the next round, so they're not paying an application fee.
Yeah.
I actually think that could be a design flaw as well. That's something we've been talking about, was whether it makes sense to automatically submit this person again, or giving them a shot to edit their proposal and then resubmit. So we just give them like a full refund and then allow them to resubmit. It's a bit more work on their ends, but I think the benefit that they actually get from having to resubmit is probably something that we'll probably explore and I would assume implement in the future.
Yeah, no, look, it's a real good point, because this is one of... CPS, as brilliant as it is, one of the unfortunate things is, and I get quite fired up, is if we get builders and then if there's feedback during the voting session, in my eyes, it's like something's wrong there. Something's failed in the process because they have to wait another month essentially, and sometimes the teams may have to disband, or they just may move on to other things because they can't wait for the month they need funding. Now, this is a hypothetical, but that can play out. So to your point, yeah, resubmit with the best of intentions. However, it could be circumstances changed, or they haven't taken on feedback, so giving them the opportunity to, like in this case, if they were not as high priority, usually most of the time the validators should give constructive feedback on what they would like to see or the changes they want to see part of this project for it to be, prioritized. And yeah, then they can go and make the changes and kind of put through a new application.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree for sure that we've run into those situations where people didn't receive feedback during the application period, and now in the voting period, there's questions being asked, or there's just something in their proposal that a certain validator might not have liked. That once it's submitted on chain, it can't be changed. Yeah. And that's been like one thing we've been exploring as well, is like talking about this draft section that you kind of submit your draft and you need to get feedback for whatever 7 days or something like that for being able to submit on chain, or just removing these cycles altogether and exploring a different path. That is a higher level idea that we could maybe discuss later on, but so, in general, that's how it works.
Okay. Well, actually, even I'd been given this, because you've got the 15 days and then the voting happens, right? And usually when the voting happens, that's where then the validators put in some comments. And you're just like, wait a minute, if you had this, why didn't you say it in the first 15 days? Is there a way, like just as a quick fix in that first 15 days, to have validators kind of open up a question and answer section in CPS under the proposals, just like it does in the next section? So at least then, rather than the forums, it encourages people in the proposal, like validators can kind of go, do we have questions? Do we have feedback? And if they click no, we know they've reviewed it before the voting period. I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but it's almost like a tick box in the first phase before it moves to the second phase.
I think that would be something that could be explored. I think in general, there's no way to like ensure that someone actually read these things. So worst case scenario, they just submit, no, I don't have any questions, which is fine. I think there's a lot of this process, like this early process before actual on-chain voting, that can be explored. And something like, this draft section, or even like you're saying, discussing of a specific proposal, a lot of this can happen off-chain. I think in general, when we're talking about blockchain, we think everything has to be on-chain, everything has to be submitted with the transaction. But a lot of these initial discussions can be off-chain and can be built on top of the existing protocol. So, I mean, I agree that it's an issue for sure, and it's something that I think about a lot.
Oh, you there?
Can you hear me?
Okay. No, cool. Look, I know I sidetracked there. I didn't mean to. I just had that moment. But overall, what I love about we were talking priority process, and just to really summarize for everyone, if you see a ton of CPS proposals going in one round, you should not be discouraged to put through, is what I'm getting at, what I'm hearing. Because even if your work is $500, $1,000, $2,000, based on how TJ explained it, we got a situation if your bigger projects, asking for 50, 60,000, and they're rated on lower priority, then there's a high chance with the minimum budget in CPS that, you know, your smaller pieces of work would go through as long as they get approved and they're adding value. So for me, like, while I'm having this conversation, I always have this: if the devs sitting there going, hey, I don't want to build a big project, but I could really help with documentation, I can help with the onboarding process that Icon desperately needs from a dev perspective, and IREC's doing some sensational work over there. So, you know, that you can look to put together these proposals in CPS to fund yourself a couple of $1,000 and really work with Eric to go, we'll deliver this much piece of all these pieces of work, and this is what we can help with, and then go to CPS and get some funding for your time. Is that some of the stuff, TJ, you'd like to actively see, like people really getting a little bit granular in trying to accomplish a few things across Icon?
Yeah, no, of course. Like, especially with a lot of these protocols in the future, and especially stuff like the tracker, more of the public good stuff. Anyone can submit a pull request on GitHub, and it can be reviewed by the project manager or whoever is working on developing. And, you know, if what you actually built is valuable to whatever you submitted to, I would assume it would be accepted, and you should be eligible for, you know, compensation through CPS or whatever means. And you have like a very obvious, like, here's what I did. Your proposal is like, here's what I did, here's a link, here's like the GitHub comments, like all that stuff is like very obvious. And I think validators will have an easy job to determine, you know, if that was worthy of funding. So I definitely would say encouraging those types of situations would be very valuable, and fill in a lot of gaps that we might have.
Yeah, I agree. Excellent. Okay, so we've got a real good picture of current state CPS. You've alluded to a few changes in the future, but I want to kind of ask this next question. What is currently in the next 3 to 4 to 5 months in the pipeline for CPS? Is there, or is it at a phase of let's just let it run for a little while before we make further changes?
Yeah, so I think we're getting really close to more of a steady state protocol, where we're not making these huge priority system changes, or you know, implementing inflation into the mix. It's more of like, now we're finishing up Java migration. So we had 3 Python smart contracts that the first one was already migrated to Java, and so we have 2 more, and we're basically done with that. Just finishing like integration testing and functional testing. And once that's live, basically what that will allow us to do, once we are at a steady state, is give complete ownership of all the CPS to the network. And that removes basically any centralized entity of being able to fully control the CPS. So that will be like a major part of the CPS in the long run. And to just go along with that, like, I think we're in a good enough state where we could probably, after that Java migration is finished, that we could probably not make any more changes, and it'd be fine. But I think there's a lot of improvements that we can still make. And that's kind of like what I've been looking at more in terms of like the future. And I mean, like, very immediate, we have this Java migration. We have a dark theme to go along with the light theme, because I know all the devs are working in the dark, like myself right now, and want that dark theme for their eyes. And let's see, we're also allowing like direct deposit of bnUSD into the CPS treasury. So that'll be important for projects like Ananus Invictus. I always get the name wrong, but the NFT project that just launched and contributes a portion of the sales to the CPS. And I think there's other projects trying to do it, but basically, like, what that allows is these projects to give back to the CPS. And I think that would be a pretty cool moment as well.
Yeah, I agree. I know iDoge, I know Paul, he was keen on doing it with the bit of the meme project. But yeah, I agree. I've been, even in the last weekly news, I went a bit of a rant, but actually even with Brandon yesterday in the podcast, I made a big point of that. especially if the project has successful sales, if a portion of it goes back to CPS to keep funding future projects, it's a win-win for them as well that are building an icon. No, that's good. So TJ, I know you've asked this question before, and I was curious, how do you feel about people coming to CPS to build on other chains? So Snow and Ice is a good example, but given they are our chain indirectly, like let's talk others like Binance Smart Chain. These are your personal views. These aren't the views of, but what are your thoughts in general? Do you want to see more of that? Or after seeing a few projects like Wonderland and, that have come and gotten funding on CPS and deployed on another chain, we've actually seen that play out now. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think we were in a unique situation where we were working on a lot of things in terms of Icon 2.0, releasing Icon Bridge and eventually BTP. And, when Snow and Ice are live, I think things will be a lot different. I think for a project that's going to be going multi-chain, it should probably be a requirement that they launch on Icon first, or at least in like a dual launch with other chains. As it is, like, it doesn't make sense to me that launching on like Near would bring direct value to Icon holders right away. So I'm thinking about from like a value to the network perspective.
Yep.
With that in mind, if a project is launching on Binance and is directly using BTP for whatever means, we have like a completely different funding system for that through like our incentive program, right?
Yeah.
So basically how I view the CPS is ensuring the growth and sustainability of the Icon chain itself, where, we're funding public goods, we're funding projects launching on our application layer. We're funding marketing of Icon and I guess Ice or Snow in itself. But these are the community's funds, and I think you would want your funds to be used to benefit yourself and the network, in my opinion.
Yep, I agree. No, it's good. I'm glad I asked you that because. Like, I know initially everyone had very different views. It was like, just build anywhere as long as it's... And I got that, but recently, and I'm going to share a view with you, I've had this thought, like, I've seen a lot of us trying to bridge communities, which is good, which is awesome. And I think a lot of NFTs enable us to do that. But when I look at, like, some of the success stories out there and then probably blew up, and I'll reference Harmony unfortunately, but like when you think Harmony, they didn't bridge communities to expand their user base. What they had was a killer dApp that went mainstream, right? And you feel free to disagree with me here, but DeFi Kingdoms was their killer dApp. People like all the rage, it blew up. Communities from other ecosystems, they went in to explore and use, and their user base grew. A lot of chains have this similar story where some kind of dApp differentiating from what's out there was successful, that brought users in. With Icon, we have all our foundational dApps. They haven't been killer in terms of mainstream where someone goes and go, hey, but that's not a bad thing. We've got a extremely engaged user base, and I know this because now I've explored other chains and I've seen what the user bases are. Yes, it may have more adoption in different ways, but the user base isn't necessarily as connected to what's going on their chain versus what Icon has, apart from Ethereum. What I see a lot of CPS, they're going and trying to branch out and do other things on other chains. I keep thinking, take the money, keep building on Icon. The more we start having these, like, say if Wonderland actually built, I would love to have seen Supernode Racing. Gio's going to kill me for this, but a lot of these projects, I get it. It's easier to get devs and stuff, but if all these kept launching on Icon, our ecosystem itself would become valuable and promote its interoperability features, because all of a sudden people are looking at Icon. One of these turns out to be the breakout app, where more eyeballs come to us, and then everything Icon has to offer it becomes a thing, right? Because people come and explore and go, oh shit, interoperability, how can I connect to this? This is how it does it. This Xcall service does this. Even more eyes. That's just my personal view. I don't know. Do you want to rant over?
Yeah, and I think, honestly, like, this is a very complex question, and I think a lot of takes on this and are right in their own ways. So, like, we've yet to see what the type of value accrual from ICE and Snow is going to be for the Icon network. Sure. Say it is extremely highly valuable to our network, then it does make sense to fund stuff on there and improve that network. Whereas, if something is going to be able to capture a lot of eyes on one chain and then bring them over to Icon, that could also be considered value. And we were in a situation before where we were a pretty siloed ecosystem where even if we did have a killer dApp, a lot of people might not have been able to get to our chain. So once we're getting into more of this interoperable future with Icon Bridge and BTP, I think it really opens the doors that we're funding projects on Icon or ICE, and people actually have a way to get to our networks and use them, and we're more composable with other networks. Yeah. I think that gives us a better opportunity to be, have that killer dApp you're talking about. So it's like a lot of a timing issue, a lot of kind of just waiting to see where certain value accrual mechanisms are going to be. But in general, I think what it comes down to at the end, even with all those stuff, is that hopefully Icon is like the main source for a lot of this funding. And if we get to a situation where a lot of ICE projects are competing with Icon projects for funding, maybe we work with ICE or Snow to make CPS into a dual network grant system with, ICZ also going into the CPS for some type of thing. We don't know what the grant system is going to look like for Snow. So there is, or do we?
No, well, we do a little bit. So, with the new revised tokenomics, a large portion of the supply has been reserved, 60% essentially, in some form of treasury for granting builders and ongoing incentives. So, and I think a lot of that came in review with kind of assessing to go, technically, with CPS couldn't fund the kind of growth we want out of ICE and Snow, right? If we want to lure devs, it just does not have, we would have to increase inflation or things we don't want to do, basically. So that's where the tokenomics had been revised for Snow. And now, even though people, 1-per-1, yes, you did get 1-per-1 airdrop, but the rest of it isn't going to the teams, it isn't going to anyone's pockets. It's literally sitting there so that we can keep incentivizing building, especially when we're bootstrapping the chain initially. But to your point,
and I think that that's important to my point as well, is that like that funding from ICE and Snow wasn't really available for some of these projects we were talking about before, whereas now it might be a time for us to have the conversation of you should be going to that like ICE to fund your project if you're building on ICE. If you're going to use BTP, you should use our fund specifically for BTP. If you want to build on Icon, here's a decentralized grant system for Icon, right? Yeah,
exactly.
These funds are set aside for specific purposes, and I believe they should be used for those purposes. And at the end, like, ICE network benefits from that type of situation as well, I think.
Yeah, and I guess my comments is, like, the whole reason we're doing Snow and ICE is for this. So I kind of expect where if a chain is wanting to use it, be interoperable in some way, they're going to deploy on Snow or ICE. And that's fine. That's cool. That's what it's there to do, right? I think for me, the other side of it was... these should be our destination chains in my eyes, and then hopefully we attract users through what is on our chains, that people kind of look over the window and go, hey, that looks pretty good and I can get there now because there's all these bridges connected between all our chains. But
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, good. No, and this is why I was like, nothing against, like, I think that's why Snow and Ice exists, right? So, and we're close. Like, Snow, people don't realize that they do now, but once the crowd loan's done, yeah, exactly. When the crowd loan's done, literally after the auction period, the chain will launch. The chain has to be submitted to the crowd loan and for the process to actually kick off. So no revisions can happen. Nothing changes. It wins, it gets deployed, and the chain's live, and off we go, and people can start going nuts. Okay.
Soon.
Yes, very soon. So cool. Okay, that's good. Again, went on a few rants. My apologies there, but. CPS, is there anything else, TJ, from a CPS perspective that you wanted to talk about, share? Do you have any annoyances? Do you wish things?
Yeah, so I think one big thing is more recently, probably the past month or two, we open sourced like all the CPS. So you can go on GitHub right now on like the EYEONICON community organization or the repo, and you can see the CPS. You can see all the smart contracts that the CPS uses. I have a CPS wiki there that hopefully describes, what's going on very well. So when we're talking about, devs contributing to the ecosystem, this would be one way you can directly comment, raise issues on the CPS. A lot of that stuff would really help me and the team as well. Where while we are the ones that use it, we're one of maybe 26 validators that are constantly using this protocol. So that's one thing that I think, and just like is a pretty interesting thing to take a look at as well. Other than that, like I'll be the first one to say I don't think it's a perfect system. I think while it's at a steady state and could probably live and do its job forever, I'm pretty excited to implement more improvements and do more research in, like MakerDAO is having a huge governance discussion right now. A lot of protocols outside of EYEONICON are having governance issues, and a lot of people are writing research articles on DAOs now. It's become a big thing in the industry, and obviously CPS is very unique. Like I don't think there's a single blockchain in the industry right now that has something like the CPS, which is cool for us, but also like I don't have a lot of reference implementations when we're talking about these things. So things might come out in trial and error, and there's not like a right answer for any of these things. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like I think it's led to a lot of research on my end from like an incentives perspective. So some people have had a stance that validators should be getting paid directly to contribute to the CPS, and others feel that it's not necessary. I don't really have a strong take on that at this time, but I've been trying to research.
Paid? When you say paid to contribute, as in
more as in like so that's been like something in like even just the MakerDAO ecosystem where the delegates that are making voting decisions on behalf of Maker token holders, I believe is how it works. They're making so many decisions that they don't feel like they're adequately being compensated for the amount of time and effort. It's like I'm pretty sure it's like a full-time job for them. And like some things that I've been exploring in terms of actually bringing in a bit more structure to the governance side of this, where we have someone take on a bigger role as like a treasury manager or like CPS communications development. Like there's a bunch of different possible responsibilities that could be taken over, and like those people would for sure need to be compensated. So I think there's like a lot of interesting things that could go along with that, and with with like kind of a more restructured hierarchical approach, we could possibly get into what we were talking earlier of just like completely removing cycles and instead having it like be completely permissionless, where you submit your proposal and it doesn't receive its allocation until a certain percentage of acceptance is reached. And kind of what I like about that is, rather than a project being subject to these 1 month intervals where you have 1 month to get enough done to essentially get accepted, receive your money, and make it to the next period. Whereas without cycles, you can have like very clear deliverables that need to release your funding. So you could have a first milestone of building like a prototype, second milestone of launching on testnet, and third milestone of launching on like mainnet. And a prototype might only take like 2 weeks. So the second you finish that prototype, you could request for funding and receive that funding and immediately move on to, you know, getting to testnet that might take 3 months. And you essentially run into a situation where the protocol has to continue to develop this project and has to bring it to testnet for them to release that next set of funding. And this actually probably simplifies things for validators as well, because they know what are the deliverables for this project. One, it has to be on testnet. Two, I can open this app on testnet. Is it doing what they said it would do? Is it working? And those are like very easy things for a validator to go in and verify and you know, make that decision on whether the project to receive funding or not. So with that being said, it just, you know, kind of removes that weird 1 month time constraint where everyone's like, I don't know if I got enough done, but I really need the funding because we were working, like that type of situation.
Yeah. But it also makes the whole application process smoother, especially they put it through straight away, they see the rejections with feedback, they can reassess, make changes, come back for an application much sooner. A couple of days they could revise, taking in feedback, etc. Right?
Yeah, and I think, but like the kind of the problem I see with that scenario, at least in the current form, is that and kind of the reason why we have these project periods is validators know that within this 15 days, I have to make these decisions.
Yeah.
And without those periods, it kind of becomes a coordination problem where who's going to get together 26 different entities in different time zones to bring them together and make these decisions. Where when I was talking about, you know, restructuring a bit, you can have kind of these leaders that have their own, I don't know, subcommittees. It's not completely thought through an idea yet, but basically I think a bit more structure could allow us to speed up this process. And hopefully that speeds up the process of projects being deployed as well, which, you know, is a big thing.
Yep. No, that's good. I'm glad you.
That's my caffeine rant for you.
Yeah, love it. No, and I have so many follow-up questions, but I know we could talk for hours, like we did last time, and then the episode didn't air. Oh
yeah.
So look, TJ, I think that's good enough. I wanted to start talking about BTP and stuff, but I reckon let's save that conversation and bring you back on the show, where I want you to talk about how you envision some of the fees that BTP Icon Bridge generate, how that feedback loop will work, or what you hope to see, or some of the discussions happening in the background along with relay incentivization. Like I want to hear a lot about that as well, but today's conversation was CPS, so let's leave it here and bring you back on the show. How's that sound?
Yeah, of course. And like you said earlier, a lot of the stuff that I've even said, like especially towards the end, is just stuff I've been doing research, my personal time, and is something that interests me. And I think that these are ways that we can improve the CPS. And what I'm very open to is people kind of giving me a rebuttal and saying why this won't work, why that won't work, and suggesting something else. Because, right, this is a community project, a community protocol. And in my personal opinion, I think it's very valuable to, a decentralized and sustainable future of the ICON network. So anyone that's interested can always, reach out to me and kind of give me some feedback, because all of this is to hopefully bring more value to ICON in the long run. So all feedback is welcome.
And this is why when TJ does put out these posts, and he literally, like, the first 10 lines of the post is, these are my thoughts, these aren't changes.
I promise I'm not changing things yet. I'm just bringing up the discussion. It's an idea.
No, look, it's definitely, I know the first one when you did, I remember getting on the phone to you, I was outraged, and then I calmed down, and I myself realized, I'm like, he's just sharing a thought. It's something to discuss. So my
but I commend everyone's passion to improve ICON, because that's what we're here for in the end of the day.
Yeah, agree. I actually wanted to like the MakerDAO, what you said. One quick, because I remember when I was right into MakerDAO as well, they were working through the options of delegates, where essentially instead of every MakerDAO token holder voting, they could delegate to a representative, and then that person would have that much weighing on the decisions of whatever proposals for changes were happening. So when I think of ICON, but that's why we vote for the validators, right?
Correct. So in like a very high level, you are, as a community member or ICX staker, helping make decisions for the CPS. And in a way, rather than like a direct democracy, which would be one token, one vote, every time a token is voted, that counts towards the proposal. It's more of a representative democracy, where you're voting for someone that you think is gonna, convey your values and make decisions on your behalf that you think would be for the benefit of the protocol. And those people are tasked to actually make these decisions. So like, I'm pretty sure, and I'm not a history buff by any means, but I'm pretty sure a lot of like the early democratic states were direct democracy, where everyone was able to vote, and that didn't work very well. And now it kind of evolved into a more representative democracy, which is even what you would see in like US politics. So but yeah, that's like basically DPoS in a nutshell.
Awesome.
Minus some very technical details, but yeah. Okay,
TJ, look, thanks, man. Really appreciate you coming on the show. Everyone, remember TJ sharing most of the time his views, as he kept saying before he spoke.
A disclaimer in the video comments.
Yeah, exactly. And not financial advice, as always. Now, make sure you like, share, subscribe, get this content out there. Builders looking to build, this is the stuff they need to hear. They need to know that they've got a fund. No need for KYC. You just have to convince a bunch of validators that your project is going to add value, and go and get funding and start building stuff on ICON. Thanks, TJ.
Yeah, thank you, Fez.